Hello and a very warm welcome to this special edition of World Panorama. Over the next half an hour, we bring you the events that made news in 2012 and the moments that will have an impact on our future. For India, the year gone by has been a mixed bag. While its ties with Pakistan, ASEAN nations and Myanmar saw an upswing, it had to contend with the growing influence of China in its neighborhood. With China looking to fill in the vacuum left by the slow decline of US power in the Indian Ocean, many see India as a counterweight to the Chinese power. Here's what 2012 has been all about for India and its neighbors. Building a strategic partnership with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, India has become closer with the region experiencing robust economic growth. ASEAN and India reached a free trade agreement in services and investments and vowed to improve air and land links. In addition to economic cooperation, the two sides also decided to intensify maritime security cooperation and underline the need for freedom of navigation. In fact, Vietnamese asked for New Delhi's direct intervention into South China Sea territorial disputes. Though India is not a party to the dispute, it has oil exploration projects in the Vietnamese blocks. This is much to the discomfort of China, which has been objecting to these ventures, claiming that the territory belongs to it. India has been maintaining that all concerned countries must respect principles of international law in resolving the issue, while asserting that freedom of navigation and access to resources in the area must be ensured in accordance with the laid down plans. The other important development, Maldives' government took control of the Malé International Airport from the Indian company GMR and shunned away the largest ever FDI. Does this indicate weakening of India's strategic hold in Asia? Perhaps. India is facing many challenges from China that is belligerently increasing its foothold in the Asian landmass, especially the Indian neighborhood. China is on a continuous lookout for opportunities in Bangladesh for setting up garment factories in the country rich in low-priced human resource. China has provided Sri Lanka with $5 billion in economic, military and technical assistance and has become one of the leading trading partners of Sri Lanka. Nepal had signed a contract of $6 billion for a hydropower project that was earlier supposed to be awarded to an Indian company. India recently voted against Sri Lanka at UN for serious violations of human rights under pressure from Tamil-dominated political parties of India. And to add to this, the Teesta Water Treaty issue with Bangladesh made matters worse. Relations between New Delhi and Islamabad have also improved this year. The 2008 terrorist attacks in Mumbai have been a big setback for peace efforts between the two rival nations. In 2012, India allowed direct investment from Pakistan, which trade analysts say is one such step towards improved relations. At the beginning of December, Pakistan's Interior Minister formalized a new visa agreement within India during his visit to New Delhi. Analysts say that with the hanging of Ajmal Kasab, the sole surviving gunman of the attacks belonging to Pakistan in November, both nations have a chance to bury the hatchet and move ahead. Consequent to the visit of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to Myanmar and the visit of Aung San Suu Kyi to India, the Indo-Myanmar relations have been on an upswing. Manmohan Singh's visit in May, the first in 25 years by an Indian Prime Minister, was a historic one. The visit was significant in many respects, particularly in asserting India's role in the region. In 2012, India is seen to have become more proactive in its relations with Myanmar, and the Indian industry come out of the shell to invest in Myanmar and interact with trade and industrial agencies. The year 2012 has been a tumultuous year in American politics. With the presidential election capping off the year, Americans witnessed a series of bitter domestic battles and turbulent events overseas. Towards the year end, the US administration is seen struggling to avoid what it termed as a fiscal cliff, leading many commentators to think aloud on the decline of America. optimism about the economy and a big turnout of the core Democratic coalition sealed President Barack Obama's re-election victory. Obama's victory means his economic vision is still alive and about to drive the political conversation with his adversaries. The legacy of Obama's first term is safe and enshrined to history. The US president will push for higher taxes on the wealthy as a way to shrink a choking debt and to steer money toward the programs he wants. He's also likely to try and land a massive financial deficit-cutting deal with the Congress in the coming months and then move on to an immigration overhaul, tax reform and other bipartisan dreams. Obama will not have to worry that his healthcare law could be repealed or that his Wall Street reforms will be gutted. Though the president likely will be dealing again with the Republican-run House of Representatives whose leader, Speaker John Boehner, declared on election night that his party is the one with the mandate, no higher taxes, Obama will still have his firewall in the Senate, with Democrats likely to hang on to their narrow majority. But they don't have enough seats to keep Republicans from bottling up any major legislation with delaying tactics. Over the years, and this year more, a general perception has arisen that American power is on the decline. This is largely because despite enormously expensive military efforts that lasted for many years, the US has been unable to pacify either Iraq or Afghanistan. Indeed, the growing unpopularity of fighting these wars in America has resulted in US forces leaving Iraq at the end of 2011 and beginning their withdrawal from Afghanistan, which is due to be completed at the end of 2014. Can the US exert the leadership it still earns from its undoubted economic, military and political strengths in the new setting of emerging and shifting powers? Can it share power and convince others it's sincere? Are some questions America needs to find answers to in the coming months or years. With regards to China as well, many thought leaders, business people, policy makers, academics in the US have voiced concerns for a number of years now that the US is losing its competitive edge. They see a global competition for jobs, for talent, for business. They say that while China has been rapidly becoming more competitive, the US has become less and less able to compete globally. One of the biggest news stories of the year occurred in late October when devastating superstorm Sandy slammed into the eastern seaboard, decimating parts of New York City, much of New Jersey and surrounding areas. The year ended with a horrific shooting at an elementary school in Connecticut when a 20-year-old went on a rampage, apparently using guns that had been legally purchased by his mother. The world watched with horror. For China, it was supposed to be a momentous year, but it turned out to be a disappointing one. Its once-in-a-decade power handover threw up more questions and concerns than hope for the future. The year saw China locked in disputes with a large number of neighbors. It made no progress towards settling its squabble over disputed territories. Its biggest political star was purged amid a murder scandal. Here are some events that dominated China's Year of the Dragon.
Two incidents, both related to territorial disputes, captured global headlines for months: the South China Sea and the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands. The squabbles over the islets, rocks and reefs have been boiling hot, lukewarm or cold for decades. But while Beijing was happy to bid its time for years, it now appears impatient for a resolution. Nor does China seem willing to give way. It had a naval standoff with the Philippines over the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea for 2 months from April. That was followed by China sending out its largest ever patrol vessel into the disputed waters and the People's Liberation Army announcing its intentions in late June to start combat-ready patrols. As if that was not enough, China brought its new brute force into the bargaining halls of ASEAN, snuffing out a joint statement by the 10-member body to address the dispute in July. Beijing got its way through ally Cambodia, the ASEAN chair, this year. It was the first time the Southeast Asian grouping failed to produce a communique after a summit. Similar assertiveness was played up in China itself. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese took to the streets in protests, sometimes violent, after Japan nationalized the Diaoyu Senkaku Islands in September. Beijing sent ships into the disputed waters repeatedly and even a state-owned aeroplane in December, prompting Tokyo to scramble F-15 fighter jets. Meanwhile, China and two of its neighbors, Vietnam and India, were locked in a new dispute on in December over energy exploration in the South China Sea, a signal that Beijing plans to continue its hard line in the increasingly contentious waterway. "2012 is also seen as Year of Bo Xilai. The former Chongqing party boss was among the most famous of the aspiring group of leaders after cracking down on triads and prompting red revolutionary songs in the southwestern megacity. The politician was a hot contender for promotion to the Apex Politburo Standing Committee at the Communist Party's leadership reshuffle. In the end, it was indeed his year, but not quite what he himself or the rest of the world had imagined it to be. Instead of rising to the top ranks of Chinese power, he was disgraced amid sensational scandal. Bo's trial for involvement in murder, corruption and maintaining improper sexual relations with a number of women is likely to be in 2013, ensuring that the scandal will continue to haunt the Communist Party in the new year under a new leadership. Instead of moving towards a more systematic form of transition, the Chinese Communist Party, that is CCP, remains unable to cut off its tether to the force of personalities. Before the 18th Party Congress, much had been made out about how the event will herald generational change. A fresh bunch of leaders able to lead China for another decade would succeed the Who Went team, which would see 7 of its elite 9 men retire. But the end result was disappointing. The new 4th rank Yu Zhensheng, for instance, is only 2.5 years younger than Hu. In the new downsized 7-person Politburo Standing Committee, only 2 can serve 2 terms until 2022, party leader Xi Jinping and incoming Premier Li Keqiang. Why the missed opportunity for genuine party renewal? In a word, politics. Hopes were further doused by the Conservatives, who dominate the new team, potentially stymieing anti-graft measures and even China's continued commitment to the market economy. For now, the Chinese Communist Party is seen as facing a number of challenges that are undercutting its legitimacy. A widening rich-poor divide, a desperate need for social reforms, political corruption, and a spate of sex scandals, including party officials. As such, the Communist Party must make cleaning up its own domestic affairs a top priority in 2013.
After the fall of dictators and the promise of freedom and justice, the past 12 months saw splits in the coalitions that led revolutionary changes in West Asia and North Africa. They were celebrations of newly gained power, mainly by the Islamists, but protests from their erstwhile allies in the Jasmine Revolution raised doubts about the sustainability of new regimes. International tensions with Iran over its nuclear program escalated dramatically in 2012. The year began with President Obama signing into law crippling sanctions on Iran and the European Union agreeing to impose an unusually strong oil embargo. Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, a refrain it would maintain through the year. As the summer heated up, so did the regional sense that an Israeli strike might be impending. International efforts to bring about a halt to Iran's nuclear program, one way or another, will likely crescendo, perhaps conclusively, in the years ahead. Syria's already violent uprising became a full-fledged civil war in 2012. Fighting in the conflict that had first erupted in March of 2011 had been limited to certain parts of the country away from the largest population centers. In July 2012, however, full-fledged fighting erupted in Syria's 2 largest cities, Damascus and Aleppo. While at the beginning of the year some 5,000 Syrians had died, according to UN officials, that estimate is now 7 to 10-fold greater, with the number of Syrians killed nearing 50,000. Syria's civil war has had a significant spillover effect on its neighbors. The opposition is gaining increasing international recognition. On 11th of November, some Syrian opposition groups established the National Coalition for Syrian Revolutionary and Opposition Forces in Doha, Qatar. Towards the end of the year, the crisis made it more difficult for Turkey and Iran to continue giving the impression of normality in their ties, something they've tried hard to do in the past despite disagreements in specific issues. With Ankara firmly behind the Syrian opposition and Tehran continuing its political and military support for the regime of President al-Assad, serious cracks have started to emerge in relations between the two countries. With the election of a new president and a transformed post-revolutionary political scene, 2012 has been a defining year for Egypt. January began with Egypt's Islamist parties winning elections into parliament, with the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party winning the largest number of seats. On November 22nd, just one day after garnering international recognition for his role in brokering an Israel-Hamas ceasefire, Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi shocked Egypt by issuing a decree granting himself broad sweeping powers outside judicial review. Morsi used these new self-appointed powers to ensure that the Islamist-dominated Constituent Assembly tasked with writing a new constitution could not be subject to the judiciary's scrutiny. Hundreds of thousands of protesters poured into the streets to demonstrate against the president's decree. Precipitating further violent protests, the Islamist-dominated Constituent Assembly submitted a draft constitution that was approved by Morsi, who then put in place a national referendum. Eventually, the constitution was approved by a majority of Egyptians. With new parliamentary elections slated for early next year, it is to be seen if Egypt's challenges will be resolved peacefully through new revamped institutions, or if rising discontent and seemingly insurmountable challenges will lead to more violence and political action in the country's streets. Like many countries in the Arab world, the year 2012 brought significant changes to the people of Palestine. Clashes between Israel and Hamas, which began earlier in June, resulted in casualties on both sides. On November 14th, an Israeli airstrike on Gaza killed Hamas senior commander Ahmad al-Jabari. A day after, Hamas fired 2 rockets targeting Tel Aviv in the first attack on Israel's commercial capital in 20 years. The attack prompted a devastating war that lasted for 8 days and in which 160 Palestinians and 6 Israelis were killed. With a ceasefire brokered by Egypt's Islamist President Mohamed Morsi, the war ended and a truce came into effect on 21st November. Along with all its ups and downs, the month of November ended with a joyful development for Palestinians. After a 65-year quest for statehood, the UN General Assembly voted on recognizing Palestine as a non-member state on November 29th. Yet Libya is in fact one of the success stories of the Arab Spring from the moderate and progressive point of view. The Islamist parties did poorly in the election despite campaigns bankrolled by sponsors in Qatar and Saudi Arabia. In the weeks after killings, while crowds were attacking Western embassies in many Muslim countries in reaction to a film about the Prophet Muhammad, people in Benghazi were out in the streets to drive out hardline groups. And that's not all. The year 2012 was an eventful one indeed. World Panorama gets you a concise report of the other major events from the year. Here's a roundup.
The new year started on a high note as London welcomed it with a spectacular firework display around the London Eye on January 1st. After Big Ben chimed midnight, the Thames River around the London Eye was lit up by one of the best fireworks display witnessed in the capital city in recent years. Tragedy followed soon after in the other part of the world. Summer flooding inundated towns in East Australia in early February, stranding thousands of people and affecting the coal mining industry and agriculture. More than 11,000 people in the town of Murray in the north of New South Wales were isolated by the flooding and thousands were evacuated, according to emergency services authorities. Bombers targeted staff at Israel's embassies in India and Georgia on February 13th. A bomb exploded in New Delhi, but a second device in Tbilisi was defused. Indian police said a bomb hit an embassy car and wounded a woman. Israel had put its foreign missions on especially high alert ahead of the 12th anniversary of the assassination in 2008 of the military mastermind of Lebanon's Hezbollah guerrillas, linked to the Shiite Islamist group Hezbollah. North Korea held a ceremony for its eternal president Kim Il-sung on 14th of April, on the eve of his 100th birthday celebrations and a day after the failure of a much-hyped rocket launch. Over 50,000 people cheered and clapped in Pyongyang's Kim Il-sung Stadium as Kim Jong-un, Kim Il-sung's grandson, walked out onto the balcony waving to the crowd. Kim Jong-un became leader of the reclusive state when his father, Kim Jong-il, died in December and had recently received the country's top military post, completing his rise to power. The rocket, which North Korea said would launch a satellite, but which the US and its allies called a disguised ballistic missile test, is thought to have landed in the sea minutes after taking off. François Hollande officially became France's first socialist president in 17 years as outgoing President Nicolas Sarkozy left the Élysée Palace for the last time on May 15th. Hollande walked up the red carpet at the start of the ceremony as a self-styled Mr. Normal, but finished it as the 7th president of France's Fifth Republic. Former Bosnian Serb army commander 70-year-old Ratko Mladic appeared in court on May 16th for his genocide trial, looking confident and composed. The Mars science rover Curiosity landed on the Martian surface shortly after 10:30 p.m. Pacific time on August 5th to begin a 2-year mission seeking evidence the red planet once hosted ingredients for life. Mission controllers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory near Los Angeles burst into applause and cheered as they received signals relayed by a Mars orbiter confirming that the rover had survived a make-or-break descent and touched down within its landing zone. NASA described the feat as perhaps the most complex achieved in robotic spaceflight. Ecuador has granted political asylum to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, Foreign Minister Ricardo Patino said on August 16th, a day after the British government threatened to storm Ecuador's embassy in London to arrest Assange. 3 members of a feminist punk band, Pussy Riot, were found guilty on August 17th of hooliganism motivated by religious hatred after they staged an anti-Kremlin protest in a church. An Austrian daredevil leapt into the stratosphere from a balloon hovering near the edge of space 24 miles above Earth on October 14th, breaking as many as 3 world records, including the highest skydive ever, project sponsors said. Hurricane Sandy began battering the US East Coast on October 29th with fierce winds and driving rain as the monster storm shut down transportation, shuttered businesses and sent thousands scrambling for higher ground hours before the worst was due to strike. About 50 million people from the mid-Atlantic to Canada were in the path of the nearly 1,000-mile-wide storm, which forecasters said could be the largest to hit the mainland in US history.
From the biggest scandals to the London Olympics, 2012 was filled with historic moments and essentially everything we love about sport itself: excitement, drama and inspiration. There were victories and losses, successes and heartbreaks, and entertainment. Lots of it.
The year gone by saw highs and lows, starting with cycling. Lance Armstrong was stripped of his 7 Tour de France titles and banned for life on October the 20th after the International Cycling Union ratified the United States Anti-Doping Agency's sanctions against the American. 10 days earlier, USADA published a report about Armstrong which alleged the now-retired American rider has been involved in the most sophisticated, professionalized and successful doping program the sport has ever seen. Come-from-behind wins have an appeal of their own, but when it is scripted amidst one of the oldest and strongest rivalries in the world, it's usually an indescribable experience. On the final morning, Europe trailed USA 6-10. Everyone thought it was all over, till Europe won the first 5 singles. It was neck and neck from there till Europe prevailed 14.5 to 13.5 to script a most remarkable victory. Rory McIlroy, a key member of Europe's winning team, finished the year as the world's top golfer. The 23-year-old Northern Irishman also cruised to his second major by a record straight 8 shots at the PGA Championship. German Formula One driver Sebastian Vettel became the youngest triple world champion in the history of the sport when he clinched the title this year in Sao Paulo. Pushed till the very end by a formidable and equally superb Fernando Alonso of Ferrari, the 25-year-old also became only the third driver in history to win successive titles, equaling the feats of Argentine Juan Manuel Fangio and his childhood idol Michael Schumacher. Football may be a team game, but this wizard from Argentina seems to have turned it into an individual sport. The year started off disappointingly when Barcelona failed to defend the Champions League title, but Messi quickly embarked on a goal-scoring spree that left German legend Gerd Müller's 40-year-old record for goals scored in a calendar year in tatters. Messi's 2012 tally currently stands at 90. Brazil may have won the new millennium's first World Cup in Japan-South Korea 2002, but Spain have dislodged them from the top spot and become the team to watch in world soccer. They won the World Cup in 2010, and this year Spain became the first nation to win back-to-back European championships on either side of their World Cup triumph. Accused of not scoring more goals, their classy 4-0 demolition of Italy in the Euro 2012 final in Kiev was the biggest victory margin in any World Cup or European Championship final. Lanky US swimmer Michael Phelps continued to rule the pool and left an indelible mark on the London Olympics with an unprecedented three-peat of medals and walked off into the sunset. The American added 4 golds and 2 silver medals to his collection, making him the most decorated athlete in the history of the Olympic Games. Calling it quits after London, he ended his Olympic career with an unprecedented 22 medals spread over 3 editions: Athens in 2004, Beijing in 2008 and 2012. 18 of these medals are made of yellow metal and 2 each was silver and bronze. The Americans' feats are so unique that the International Swimming Federation, FINA, presented Phelps with a Lifetime Achievement Award during the London Games itself. Already a legend sprinter Usain Bolt reaffirmed his standing as the greatest sprinter of all time in 2012. The towering Jamaican clinched 3 gold medals at the London Olympics, matching his Beijing tally, and rewrote a cachet of records. He defended his 100-meter gold in 9.63 seconds, an Olympic record, and completed a golden Grand Slam by becoming the first man to defend the 100 and 200-meter titles in successive Olympic Games. He took the 200 meters in 19.32 seconds, matching Michael Johnson's mark of 19.32 seconds set in the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. Bolt capped it off by anchoring Jamaica's 4x100-meter relay team to gold in world record timing. Along with Nesta Carter, Michael Frater and Johan Blake, Bolt cantered to a gold in 36.84 seconds, breaking Jamaica's previous world record at 37.04 seconds set in 2011.
With that, it's time to say goodbye. Hope you enjoyed the show. For feedback and comments, do join us on Twitter and Facebook. See you next week with another exciting edition. Till then, goodbye and Godspeed. And a Happy New Year.